Chapter 1. The moon hung low and heavy over the deserted stretch of road, its pale light bathing the asphalt in a ghostly glow. Cars passed infrequently, their headlights piercing the darkness like the eyes of predators searching for prey. I drove this road often, a routine that had become a sort of therapy, a way to escape the suffocating confines of my mundane life. But tonight, the air was thick with tension, as if the very asphalt beneath my tires was holding its breath. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard, 2:17 a.m., a time when the world outside my car was asleep, and the only sounds were the soft hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I turned up the volume on the radio, hoping to drown out the creeping unease slithering up my spine. The DJ's voice crackled through the static, discussing the history of ghost sightings along this very road, tales of lost souls wandering aimlessly, seeking something they could never find. "You ever hear about the hitchhiker?" he said, his voice turning conspiratorial. I chuckled to myself, recalling the urban legends I had grown up with. They say if you stop to pick her up, you might just end up on the wrong side of the grave. She's a dark omen, they say. I'd heard it all before, yet as I drove deeper into the night, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, whispering secrets I couldn't quite comprehend. I turned off the radio, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. That's when I saw her, a figure standing by the side of the road. She was draped in a white dress that billowed in the wind, her hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of darkness. Against my better judgment, I slowed the car, my heart racing. "You need a ride?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned her head slowly, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to swallow the light around her. My breath hitched in my throat. "Please," she rasped, her voice a chilling melody that danced on the edge of sanity. "I need to get home." Something deep inside me screamed to drive away, but curiosity rooted me to the spot. I unlocked the doors and she glided into the passenger seat, the air around her growing colder. "Where to?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just keep going," she whispered, her gaze fixated on the road ahead, as if she could see something I couldn't. I forced myself to look at her, and it was then that I noticed the dark stains on her dress, crimson against the white fabric. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just drive," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I pressed my foot on the gas, anxiety clawing at my insides. The road stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated only by the headlights of my car. The further we went, the more the temperature seemed to drop. I could see my breath fogging up the windshield, and the shadows outside grew thicker, swallowing the landscape whole. "Do you live far from here?" I asked, trying to break the suffocating silence. "Not far," she replied, her voice distant, as if she were trapped in a memory. "But we won't make it if you don't hurry." "Hurry?" I echoed, glancing at her. "What do you mean?" She turned to me then, and I recoiled at the sight of her face. Her skin was mottled and decayed, a grotesque mask stretched over the bones beneath. "They're coming for us," she hissed, her eyes wide with terror. "Who?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "The ones who never made it home." Panic surged through my veins. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator, the engine roaring as the world blurred by. "What do you mean? Who are they?" But she just stared ahead, her expression a mix of fear and longing. "You shouldn't have picked me up," she murmured, almost to herself. Chapter 2. The road began to twist and turn, the darkness thickening like a fog. I could feel something behind us, a presence lurking just out of sight. It was as if the shadows were alive, crawling closer, hungry for my soul. "Please, just tell me where I'm going," I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. "Home," she whispered. "But it's not the home you think of." I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. "What do you mean? Just tell me where to turn." Suddenly, she pointed to the right, her finger trembling. "That way. You have to turn now." I swerved, the tires screeching as the car veered off the main road. The dirt path ahead was barely visible, overgrown with weeds and surrounded by trees that loomed like sentinels. I could barely keep my grip as the car bounced and jolted over the uneven ground. "Faster!" she urged, panic rising in her voice. "They're coming!" I didn't want to look back, yet an instinctual dread pulled me. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement, a dark figure flitting between the trees, its silhouette elongated and twisted, a nightmare made flesh. My heart raced as I pressed down harder on the gas, desperate to escape whatever horror was pursuing us. "Faster!" she screamed again, and I felt the urgency in her voice seep into my bones. I pushed the car to its limits, but the path narrowed, the trees closing in around us like a vice. "Where the hell are we going?" I shouted, my panic spilling over. "Just a little further," she replied, her voice now frantic. "You have to trust me." But trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. I could hear the sounds of branches snapping behind us, heavy footsteps pounding on the ground, closing in. What did I do? I muttered, my mind racing with regret. Why did I stop? "Because you wanted to help," she said, her voice eerily calm. "But now they'll take you too." I cursed under my breath, the weight of her words settling like a stone in my gut. "Who are they?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "The ones who were lost, the ones who never had a chance to leave." I didn't understand, but the fear in her eyes was enough to keep me moving. I turned sharply as the path split into two, choosing the left trail without a second thought. It was darker here, the trees leaning in so closely that they seemed to whisper secrets to one another. "Where now?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Just keep going," she urged, her eyes wide and shining with a manic light. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the car lurching forward. The sound of footsteps thudded behind us, sinister and relentless. "What do they want?" I yelled, my voice echoing in the suffocating darkness. "They want you to join them," she said, her tone unnervingly calm. "Join them," I repeated, my heart racing. "Why?" "Because you stopped. You showed kindness. They'll never let you go now." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the truth in her words. "You knew this would happen," I accused, my voice rising in fury. "You brought me here." "I didn't want this," she cried, tears streaming down her decaying cheeks. "I'm just as trapped as you are." In that moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. She was as much a victim as I was, but the darkness surrounding us was growing thicker, suffocating any glimmer of compassion I might have felt. Suddenly, the car jolted violently and I struggled to regain control. "What the hell?" I shouted. "Drive," she screamed, but it was too late. Chapter 3. The headlights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. The engine sputtered, then fell silent, leaving only the sound of our frantic breaths. "Get out," she ordered, fear radiating from her. I unbuckled my seatbelt and flung open the door, adrenaline surging as I stumbled into the night. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and I could hear the faint sounds of whispering, a chorus of voices rising from the shadows. "Run," she urged, and we took off into the darkness, the underbrush scratching at our skin. But the forest was alive, the shadows shifting and twisting, clawing at our heels as we ran. I could hear the footsteps behind us echoing through the trees, growing closer. "What do they want?" I gasped, panic clawing at my throat. "They want to take you away," she said, her voice tinged with desperation. "They don't want to be alone." "What do you mean?" I panted, my lungs burning. But before she could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, a ghastly apparition with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. I froze, paralyzed by fear. "Join us," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You're one of us now." I stumbled back, my heart racing as more figures emerged from the darkness surrounding us. They were all twisted, decayed shadows of what they once were, their eyes glimmering with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. "Run!" I shouted, but the words were barely out of my mouth before the figures lunged at us. I grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her along as we tore through the forest. But they were everywhere, hands reaching, mouths open, hungry for flesh. "Please help me," she cried, her voice cracking. "Why should I?" I yelled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You brought me here." But before she could respond, the ground beneath us gave way, and we tumbled down into a pit of darkness. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I landed hard on the ground, pain shooting through my body. I looked around, fear gripping my heart as the figures began to close in on us, their hollow eyes gleaming with malevolent delight. "Welcome," one of them sneered, stepping forward. "You've finally come home." I scrambled backward, my heart racing as I realized there was no escape. The darkness closed in around me, the weight of despair settling in my stomach. "Why did you bring me here?" I screamed at the girl, but she just stared at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice trembling. I thought you could help me." But it was too late. The figures descended upon us, their mouths twisted in grotesque smiles, and as they reached for me, I realized the sinister truth about deserted roads after dark. The only thing waiting for you was an eternity of darkness and despair. And in that moment, as the darkness swallowed us whole, I understood that kindness was a curse, and my fate was sealed in blood.